Welcome back to the Flyers Nitty Gritty podcast, Gettin Gritty Wit It with your host, Yariv Wolok, and my special guest this evening, I'm very excited to introduce from Broad Street Hockey, Bill Matz. Bill, thanks for joining, buddy. How you doing?
Glad to be here, Yariv. How's it going?
Going pretty good, pretty good. I'm pretty excited to have you on. I'm not gonna lie. I've obviously listened to Broad Street Hockey over the years. Very entertaining and also high quality, production quality, which is always really awesome when you're listening to podcasts. And it's awesome, you guys had Charlie on there and stuff. So I've been watching the years, but I've actually thoroughly enjoyed your post-game stuff the most, typically after the games. I don't know if you do it as often as you used to, but I used to try to catch them like after each game, you'd be like typically pissed. And you're a really good voice to listen to. Are you still doing that? Like the post-game stuff?
Yeah. I've done, I already had Craig fill in 2 for me just because like life stuff, it comes up. I'd like to try to do as many as I can because like it's hosting the main show. It's how I get my topics. It's what people go in there and leave their comments. That's what the fans are talking about. It's what they're talking to me about. So it's what I want to talk to my co-hosts about. It was, I don't want to say more fun because, that those times sucked. But I definitely yelled and got more pissed when they were actually bad because there were so many more things to be mad about. Like now it's cool. They usually win, but it's definitely lost a little bit of that. Like, I can't believe how dumb this organization is sort of vibe.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like you had that trust the process. You're like, all right, well now it's here. And it's like, now expectations are high. It's like, everything's all serious. You have to be like, I can't just shit on every player because the expectations are supposed to be good already.
Yeah, and when they screw up, it's like disappointing. I'm like, no, this is supposed to be over with. This is supposed to be over with, guys. I thought we were moving on from this.
Yes. And it's been a very interesting beginning of the year. And obviously I want to say it's been unconventional way to win, but at the same time, when you look at really just overall, when you look at the league and you look at the way most teams have started, and even teams like Colorado, they haven't been perfect, right? New divisions, new team structures, no training camp, all this stuff. What do you think about the start so far? Have they met your expectations with an 8-3-2 start in this division particularly?
Yeah, like you look at it, if you just looked at the record, and every single one of us would have taken it preseason, even with the high expectations. We always know this team can start a little slow, a beginning of a year, especially with no training camp. You don't know what could go wrong. You would absolutely take this record. Watching the games, there's room for improvement. There's a ton of room for improvement. But again, you look at the context. Man, Sean Couturier is the most important player on this team, and it's very obvious. They've been without him most of the season, and other than against Boston, which is the team in the division they badly need him against, look at the numbers. Him against Patrice Bergeron last year, he beat the crap out of him. Oh, wow, I can't believe that line's running it up on us without Sean Couturier. So, and that's an excuse. It's injuries. Injuries happen. Right. But put everything in the context. You have to be happy with the way things can go. And when they're not playing their best and winning, that kind of just excites me for thinking, man, when this team gets it together, they're going to be really good.
Right. And actually, I want to touch on that note, right? Because you said there is a repeated pattern with the Flyers starting poorly. And you can go back, I think, maybe even 20 years at this point. I don't think we've had a better record to start. I'm pretty sure.
I think it was 2000 or something like that.
Okay, maybe it wasn't that long, but it feels like 20 years. So it's been at least a decade, right, of consistently starting mediocre, whether that team was good or not. So now I look at this team, and this team started, I would even say mediocre to some degree, just by the way they were playing, but with the best record I've seen in a long time. And if you carry that in with that pattern of getting better, do you see, because I was talking about this earlier actually on the phone with Jamie, do you see something like maybe like the Tampa Bay Lightning where, after they went to the finals or didn't go to the finals, sorry, they lost in the first round, there's a lot of disappointment the next season. They didn't necessarily come in and light the world on fire. They struggled out the gate again. I mean, not that it's the same thing, but do you see a little bit of that here?
No, I definitely think there's something to playing your best at the right time. It's cool to just roll through everybody all year. But you're going to get got at some point, whether it's a 6-game losing streak in the middle of the season or like Tampa had with Columbus a couple of years ago, just 4 in a row to start the playoffs. Like they play that series 9 more times. Tampa wins every single time. They just happen to get caught in one, and you want to peak at the right time. That's why the COVID stoppage last year, obviously the world came to an abrupt stop and everything ended, but it was so disappointing because it seemed like the Flyers were that team building to playing, at a high level at the right time. Then they come back. It looks like, oh, they're good in the bubble. And then the actual playoffs start. And we all remembered what happened. But just the fact that they're banking these points, these are going to be necessary points. You're not going to want to play Boston until the second round. You're going to maybe want to have some home ice advantage in a series or two, going into the Final Four and into the Cup final. So like banking these points, regardless of how you're playing, is very important in this season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that. And it's interesting to see how the Flyers have kind of done that. They kind of scratching and clawing their way. And then I look at the game, the back-and-back series against the Islanders. That's like the revenge moment in the season. You kind of look at, they were going to win those games. They didn't win them pretty, but weren't able to beat the Islanders at all last year, essentially. And then they beat them 3 times in the playoffs. Then this year, all of a sudden, they kind of put a showing. Today, this year you can make the argument the Boston Bruins are that to us. So, it looks like there's kind of like a changing of the guard plus an evolution of this team. I do think we're on the right track. And I think, well, let me ask you this. And most people are going to talk about Niskanen, right? Do you think we're like that one piece away from making a cup run at this point?
They absolutely need another defenseman. And now I've liked for the most part how Shane Gostisbehere has played, but I don't know if anyone actually thinks like, oh yeah, he's the guy to put next to Provorov. Like especially in, when Provorov's going to be playing close to 30 minutes in a playoff game. Like, is that the situation you want Shane Gostisbehere in? So I still think they need another top 4 defenseman, someone they can either put with Provorov or they can bump up one of the second pair guys and put the newly acquired player in the second pair. But I think this team has what it takes to make a run. I don't think they're on that elite level of like Tampa and Vegas right now, but I don't see many. I just named those 2 teams. I don't think anyone else is. Right. Like we said, Tampa, they were an elite team 2 years ago. They go out in the first round in 4. It's rarely the best team. I would like them to be as good as possible, but I definitely think they have what it takes, but we'd all be way more comfortable if they went out and acquired another defenseman, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I always think back to like that Chris Pronger trade, and we're in a position to pull something off like that today without actually even hampering our team, which is very interesting. Like we can actually trade for a Chris Pronger and still have an excessive amount of assets in pretty much every position. So I do see something like that happen probably after expansion draft. That's probably the biggest reason it's not happening. But do you see a guy like, so let's assume they're not going to go out and be able to get that big next level guy to kind of, I think it was very rare to get Matt Niskanen. I don't know if we're getting another guy of that caliber. We'll probably get somebody. Assuming we don't, do you see a guy like Phil Myers who is starting to get some time there? This is a guy I've talked about for a while. I think he's just a prototypical complementary top pairing defenseman. There's a reason he did really well with Thomas Chabot when they were really younger. I see Provorov as playing that role with him. I'm seeing it a little bit now. I don't know why they're even hesitant, but that's how I see the top pairing playing out. And then maybe Ghost dropping a more secondary role, maybe with Travis Sanheim potentially. Do you see something like that working?
I just really want to see him get a chance. They've tried, they tried out Braun at the beginning of the season. I can't believe anyone even thought that. Oh yeah, let's try this. They've tried Sanheim. Ghost is up there now. Myers seems like the guy to give the chance to. They seem to love him in a second pair role. They just seem a little reluctant to give him that last bump and put him with Provorov and just see if it works. I mean, he's big, he can skate, he can handle the puck. He's right-handed, which is a bonus. Like, I don't see why they wouldn't, other than the way pairs would potentially fall after that. Do you go Ghost Sanheim? I don't know. Are you comfortable with that? I don't know if I am.
They haven't tried that either.
Yeah, they haven't. And maybe those two things kind of go together. Like, okay, we like the way Provorov and Ghost play together. They've had chemistry in the past, and they just love Sanheim and Myers so much. Well, they just really want to keep them together.
Yeah, and I noticed they are married to that, but I think that the reason we saw Braun is because the same reason we saw AMAC there is you can throw that guy out there. Braun, he can listen to the crowd chirp at him. Well, there's no crowd right now, but he can listen if he doesn't care about social media. Niskanen doesn't care about, like, the guys who are like in their 30s, they don't care. They've heard it all. They can throw them out there. They can fail, shift in, shift out, and recover mentally. Like, maybe that's the whole hesitation with Phil Myers, where maybe they see him as like, well, he really is that guy, but let's not throw too much at him. But then I look at the pairings, right? You're allowing that to happen to Ghost, right? Because he's not that I think he can get back up there, but ideally, like, do you really want Ghost versus Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak? No, I'd rather have Myers, Provorov. And I wonder, like, if you just drop Ghost down a little bit, would that even just make him more effective, just based off of matchups?
That's a great point. Like, would he? I always thought, like, if you have him on your third pair, man, you probably have a pretty good third pair. Now it depends on who he's out there with. Right. Sure, like if it's him and Haig, I don't know if I'm all that excited, but you know, it's they just have no perfect pieces for this thing. Right. The Niskanen move and the Braun moves worked so well last year, and it evened everything out. They just have a lot of imperfect pieces, and I think this might even go if they don't acquire somebody who's, we can absolutely just put him next to Provorov, like that caliber player. This might go into the playoffs as kind of Provorov's playing 28 minutes and everyone else, you're going to have to find your time. Like, it's going to be kind of a rotation, I think, unless somebody really takes a hold of the job.
No, I totally agree with you. I think what exacerbates the problem is the injuries, right? Like you said earlier, you lose Sean Couturier, that's your best defensive forward on your team. So it's obviously going to impact you defensively, right? And offensively, because he's fantastic. And then you also lose Phil Myers, right? Who is clearly your number 3. Right. And a defense that you don't want to say is shallow, but is missing a top 4. Right.
Yeah.
So you're already looking at this position. Now you're looking at it without Phil Myers. And you're just like, I think it's one injury away from looking mediocre or like average. It's not good enough. Where the offense, they can lose a Sean Couturier and still be effective. And that's where I agree. Like, that's maybe the most important reason to bring somebody else in. And somebody who I really like, Robert Haig. He has not had a good season, even though he did do better. You know, maybe it's time that Haig, and I don't know if they want to move Haig because he's best friends with Lindblom, but maybe it's time you start making it. Maybe it's Mark Friedman's time, unfortunately, or somebody where you trade him with a pick and try to get a veteran, you know, a guy. Again, I'm not expecting Matt Niskanen caliber player, but if we can get a guy who's even 80% of that, somebody who's a little bit better than Braun, somebody who can move the puck, even a Strawman, you know, at the end of his career, something like that. Do you think that'd be enough?
Yeah, I think just somebody, Charlie talked about this on a recent episode. It's just so important to give Provorov another outlet back there. Like, we've seen it night and day, regardless of how good the guy actually is. Like, if it's Andrew McDonald, this pair is just going to be stuck in the defensive zone. If it's someone who can literally just run a give and go with them on a breakout, okay, we're fine. You know, someone else who can just find a guy up ice a little bit, skate with the puck. Yeah, and that's why Ghost, like, is he the perfect pairing? He isn't, but he can do just a few of the things that you really need him to do. And Provorov's so good, he can make up for a lot of mistakes.
And let me ask you this. Are we getting to the point where Shane Gostisbehere can be considered mentally strong?
I don't know if it's
funny to think about, right?
I don't know about mentally strong. I think he's been through a lot, and that's helping him mature. Like, he's just going to have to learn to, like, deal with a lot of things. But I do just think, like, seeing the level he's playing at right now, it's the best we've seen him in a little while. If he could just get, like, a cheap goal, like, just something would go his way, I think suddenly he'd be confident enough to play to that next level we know he's capable of, but can't always find. Like, if he got a little bit of luck, it would turn into him being actually good.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I did a player profile video on him a while back ago, and I referred to him as like the Ferrari of the Flyers, and somebody made fun of the video, as people always do. You know, they're making fun of the video and going, yeah, sports car, he keeps needing maintenance. And I'm like, no, that's the point. I was like, that's kind of my point, is a lot of these players kind of burn out these offensive defensemen, and they do require confidence. To your point, having said that, if you look at the numbers for majority of the players on this team, they're all down across the board except for JVR to some degree. And it's mostly because our power play stinks.
Yeah, it's like if you look at the numbers, it's like, well, they've had some really good games, and then you watch it and go, this is like incompetence to another level half the time. Like, I love Ivan Provorov.
What do you think it is?
Man, it's so many guys who've been together so long. I don't know. Like, that's like JVR and G, we know have chemistry. G and Jake, we know have chemistry. Ghost can do it, but they don't really use them on the top unit anymore. It's just been, I guess, so many guys have been in and out of the lineup lately in the last couple of years that they haven't been able to really just nail something down consistently. JVR has been hurt a couple of times. They've switched around the defenseman. They just settled on Provorov because he plays every night. And he's not great at it, but he's productive. So what are you going to do? Take him off? Right. And it's when they split up G and Jake, that's when it's really like, well, what are we doing here? Like, these guys, they're the reason the power play is good. The cross ice passes between those two are the reason this thing works. Taking that away, it's just kind of, that's the weapon. It's not there anymore. And
that's perfect point. That's exactly what I was thinking. And if you think back to, I was making like the Joey Mullen jokes because I'm pretty sure he retired. I don't think the Flyers like kicked him out or anything, but he was a phenomenal power play coach. And when he was here, this offense ran through G. Unfortunately, at the time, right, we didn't have many other options, but he's capable of doing it, and at the very least capable of doing it on the power play. That's one thing. And he gets the puck, but we used to run the offense on the power play through him to G, and he quarterbacks to other people. We don't do that anymore. And it's weird because you would think that's so predictable. You know, it's like, oh, they always go left side. I remember we were even kind of complaining about it as a fan base. It's like, oh, they always know what we're doing. Yeah,
but we'd be at 23%. Like,
it wouldn't matter.
It works. So,
well, isn't it the equivalent of throwing Ovechkin on the wing for a one-timer? It's like, you can say you're going to stop it, but you're not going to.
No, like, who's got a more predictable power play than Washington? Like, we know what's going to happen. I do think, like, Claude Giroux isn't what he was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. He isn't. And I think all the way back to like the Rangers playoff series when they really figured out a way to nullify Giroux, and it was McDonough. Like, put a guy on top of him.
McDonough.
Whenever he is given time and space from his spot on the left half boards, they score, they create chances. When you're on top of him, he is like that point guard who just like, all right, I don't have any options here because it was all about me being elusive and then finding the open guy. They just haven't been able to find a secondary option. I kind of thought a Nolan Patrick outlet behind the net would help that out a little, but he's been, he's had his issues with staying in the lineup and just being productive overall and earning power play time. So what are you going to do? Throw him on the top power play? I don't really know what the answer is there, but it is frustrating because you see these pieces and go, why aren't they better? Like, it's a bunch of guys who should be good on the power play. It's their thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's almost like they don't know what to use. They're like, oh, put TK on the top unit. I put him on the second unit. It's like, he's our best goal scorer, but he's not scoring. So take him off and I feel like they really, that's why I kind of go back to like the simpler time where I'm like, we knew our top unit. Like, it didn't matter. We knew our top unit. Like, they have to be, I think, more decisive with whoever that top unit's going to be. Give them the minute and a half if they need it, whatever you want to give them. But run it through the guys who are the best playmakers and just define those roles better. Like again, they didn't have Couturier, so it's a big deal. But like, just get Couturier, JVR, Voracek, and G and Provorov. Like, just go with that if you have to. Go with the veterans, but just decide what you're gonna do as like the group. Because when they keep rotating them, I feel like they've never really found a groove.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the Couturier injury weighs in, and losing the right-handed option with Simmons and replacing it with JVR, it changed things a little. Mm-hmm. But I still think there's ways to make this work, and I do think like consistency would be a big part of it. Like, if it doesn't work for a game, let's see if it works the next one. Like, leave it together. We don't have to break it up because of one shift, a couple of bad power plays, one bad game, whatever.
Yeah, it's actually a good point because, you did mention Patrick, and while I do think he started hot actually, but I do see what everybody's saying where he's obviously not where he needs to be fully overall. He is progressing, and if you do see, the one thing about Nolan in the beginning, he was chasing a lot in the beginning of 2 seasons. And it's not really the type of player he is. He's not a player who chases, actually. He's a very smart player, typically. He's more like a Sean Couturier meets a Giroux in a way. He's kind of middle of the road with both of them. He's not as elite defensively as Couturier, but he's got it. And he's not as elite offensively as Giroux, but he's got that too. Maybe he's a better goal scorer. And that's how I kind of see him. But when I'm watching him now, he's so smart. He's never really out of position anymore. From what I see, maybe he loses a physical battle here or there, but he's been pretty on par. And I think it's why he's getting more time. Maybe he will play the top power play. And, you mentioned that the right hand, I didn't actually consider that, but maybe that is where Patrick needs to be. And the skill set's so high, he is able mentally to keep up with those guys, same way as Farabee, right? You can throw Farabee anywhere, and he'll do really well. Speaking of which, I do want to talk about that line actually of Lindblom, Lawton, and Farabee. They had a really big night the other night. What do you think about that mix? Now, Lindblom's still a little quiet, obviously, but the mix worked. What did you think?
It did. I'm starting to wonder, and Lindblom, I do see him coming around a bit, but I just wonder, at what point are we going to be seeing Lindblom and Patrick playing fourth line minutes? And listen, I'm disappointed a little, I'm disappointed a little in both of them, but also it would work. That would be a damn good fourth line. I like what I'm seeing out of Lawton, Farabee, and JVR. That seems like a good trio, but this is in. The Washington game, this is what else. The Washington game, high scoring as it was, seems to me kind of like this team's the game script they need to follow.
Yep.
Close first 2 periods. Yeah, maybe their top line, better than anything the Flyers can throw out there. They have Alex Ovechkin. Come on.
Yep.
But the Flyers have the forward depth, and eventually they will break open the floodgates with their scoring and pull away in the third, just like they did in that Washington game. And I think with Couturier back and his ability, once he's 100%, to nullify a top line, we'll see it even more pronounced. The team's depth overall is its strength. Its depth at the forward spot is its strength. Other than Boston, they beat everybody without Couturier. And that's the team you need him most against. That's his thing. So I just think regardless of what the combinations are, they just have enough talent to make things work. And when one line isn't going, because you're never going to have all 4 going at the same time. You'd score 9 goals a game if you did. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Giroux, he's not really producing this week. Well, guess what? We scored 7 on Washington. So I just think they have that sort of ability, and that's kind of that's what they have to follow to have success this year.
I mean, currently, if you're looking at the Flyers statistics, you could literally look at this lineup and be like, well, there's several point per game players in this lineup. It's starting, that's what I was saying about Tampa Bay. It's starting to look like that, where the depth is so overwhelming, where even if you have a game plan, even if your top line is the best line in the league, you have to deal with 4 scoring lines. Scott Lawton's our fourth line center, right? He's not really a fourth line center, though. He's better than that. We know that he's better. Even Michael Raffalo used to be better than what he is. And NAK, even all the young guys we throw in the lineup, they're talented. We're throwing out talent every single shift. Now the defense is a little thinner, right? Because they make mistakes, they're a little more flawed. But it is something that's come playoff time. If you're not a team like Boston or the Islanders who play tight hockey, we're going to beat you because we're never going to stop attacking, and eventually you're going to make a mistake. That's where I think the Flyers can excel.
And to that point, I just think they need to attack more. And the shooting, obviously they need to shoot the damn puck, for real. But it's more just what they did so well last year was create turnovers and first get in the forecheck, win those battles. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But then the second chance forecheck, the second wave, when the other team is breaking out, the turnovers they caused at the top of the offensive zone to get second chance rushes, I thought was such a big part of the offense. We're starting to see more of that. And that's really when they get the offense going and start putting up big numbers on teams, is when they're able to create those turnovers. That attack mentality I want to see more of. Now, to get on the offensive zone, you have to break out of your defensive zone. And that's kind of been the problem more than anything. Huge. But when they get that forecheck going, man, you really see it with this team. They just got to put a little more effort in. And it's not all on the defensemen. The defensemen have their problems. Half the defensemen on this team, when they touch the puck, it's a turnover. But the forwards could be helping out a little better too, generally. So it's a team defensive issue that will just result in more offense.
100%. Actually, I think that's key to what you were saying. Is I think I actually blame the forwards even more than the defensemen in this scenario, because in a lot of these cases, you kind of know, like, okay, if you're playing defense with Braun and Haig, why are you guys leaving the zone early? Like, you have two.
What are they passing to you? Like, it ain't getting there, dude.
Exactly.
What, are they going to hit you with outlet pass?
That's kind of my point, right? Like, a guy like Provorov can get away with it. A guy like Ghost can get away with it. Even Myers or Sanheim. Like, I get it. I understand that point. But when something goes wrong, like when Ghost gets beat, where's the support? And I think that is the biggest problem that we've had this year, where last year we were much better at supporting but the players themselves were much better at supporting one another overall. Like, when the mistake was made, it was cleaned up by somebody else, notably Matt Niskanen, Sean Couturier. Not having them showed glaring weaknesses in the D, obviously. But that's a big thing to it. It's just playing as a unit. And I think when you know that you have weaknesses in your lineup, like, you need to play to that. Don't you think, to a degree?
Oh, 100%. You need to recognize who's out there. And that's some of Carter Hart's numbers this year, I think, are the result of, hey, we got Carter back there. We can take a few more risks. And then when Elliott's in there, it's like, hey, Dad's in net. Let's not disappoint him. Like, I see that sort of dynamic with and they have to have. That's more of that mentality when it is the third pair out there. Like, oh, yeah, you know what? Eric Gustafsson, he ain't covering nobody. Don't fly the zone a little early because, maybe get a little deeper in the coverage. Maybe sag back a little bit. Make sure you're like the center. Don't be high in the zone. Make sure you're in front of the net because you know who isn't going to be the other defenseman.
Well, and to that point, if you look at the times that the Flyers have struggled under AV, it's typically when they're not doing the little things right. And then you'll see guys like Scott Lawton get hat tricks. You'll see the bottom of the lineup essentially carry the team because they're just playing the system and they're rolling it, right? And the top of the line is not doing the little things right, losing their battles, but then the bottom of the lineup makes up for it. So if you're looking at the lines the way they are today, do you see anything in particular that you want to change offensively in particular? My internet went out while I was recording Broad Street Hockey today. So like there's something going on out front. So I didn't actually get to this part of the show. We did like an hour before we got to it. So we were going to talk about the idea of putting Travis Konechny with Sean Couturier to get him going. Like, let's see if we can get TK going this way, because everyone who's played with Sean Couturier the last 2 years, they've overproduced. We need Travis Konechny to produce. Maybe this is the way to do it. I'm just like hesitant to reward someone's poor play with first line ice time. But also they very badly need him to be a first line caliber player. Yeah. So it's kind of like, do you punish him or do you just go, this is the way we get the most out of him? I guess I'm starting to lean towards get him out there with Couturier, have that good first line, and then you won't have to mess with the depth parts of the lineup that are actually producing, even though some of the key pieces like TK aren't. So you're able to continue the momentum and the chemistry of those other lines and still maybe be able to boost up a TK or a Lindblom, someone who needs to get going. Yeah, actually, I was thinking, like, do they try to go Lindblom, Couturier, and TK, especially with this gap here? And I do want to talk about that as well. Like these days off, you have some guys recovering. You have sometimes not for a real practice. I mean, you will, but they have a lot of like footage that they can go over. They can have a lot of meetings virtually. Do you think there's a chance that we might see that line back together of Lindblom, Couturier, TK? You wouldn't think it'd be ideally the best line, just looking at the way the team is playing right now. But to your point, Couturier, he played one game when he had 4 points the other night or something like that.
Yeah, and he killed it, and he only played 15 minutes. Like, it was very clear.
They started him on the third line.
Yeah, like he's not 100%. It was like 15, 26 or something. So like this time, yeah, you want to get in game shape, and he hasn't played in a while, but also clearly he didn't recover from broken ribs or whatever the hell it was in like a week, So it gives him a little bit more time to get better. And then they do have the ability to just have some film study, have conversations. They can't go to the facility till everything's clear, and I get that. But there are other ways to work these things out. And then your other trios kind of get to just stay together. And when we come back from this layoff, whenever it is, they won't have to be learning something new either. So I do kind of, I guess Lindblom, Couturier, and TK might be the way to go, just to see if we can get something going out of those two wingers and keep the middle six together.
You do the G, Patrick, forecheck, and then I guess they would continue going with Lindblom, JVR, Lawton, and Farabee, and then they'll do that fourth line, whatever you want, Hayes, Raffle, and NAK. They were doing those kind of mixes. Do you feel comfortable going to the next game like that?
Yeah, I would switch out, I guess, Hayes and Patrick, just because I just have very little confidence in Nolan Patrick right now. I think he'll be better at some point. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not saying give up on Nolan Patrick. It's just, how much time can you really give the guy? I'm seeing flashes. I'm seeing a few little things more than I was, let's say, a week ago. And maybe this is a nice little rest for him, because you said he started the season hot. I liked what I saw when the season began with Nolan Patrick. It was just, I wondered, is this, oh, wow, he really hasn't missed a step. It doesn't look like he's been off for a year and a half. Or is this just adrenaline from it's the beginning of the season. You're finally back out there, feeling good. Like, you could be tired as hell and you wouldn't even feel how heavy your legs are just because you haven't got to play in however long you're feeling it. And it looks like he kind of just got a little worn down by being in the grind for the first time in 2 years. I wonder if, I expect him to get better, though. Like, he'll just build up the callus and figure it out. But this is a team built to win now. It's not a team built to have a guy figure it out.
Well, listen, I think there is a lot of truth to what you said, but you have to look at the fact that he produced those points when Couturier was playing. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about it. As soon as he had to, again, he's not supposed to be playing at that position, right? To your point, a year and a half off. He's a young player. Again, where was Sean Couturier playing at the same age? He was a fourth line player on this team. So you think about that and the way that Patrick is being used in a certain position. If Coots come back in the lineup, I could see his production come back up. Even that Lawton line, I like it. The Lawton, JVR, and Farabee, even mixing in Lindblom, whatever they want to do there. But I can't see it sticking. I actually can't see any of these line combinations sticking.
No, and we know, like, a game or two of whatever the coach sees that he doesn't like, all the lines get thrown in the blender. Like, we're never that far away from Michael Raffle getting top 6 minutes, regardless.
It happened the other game.
Yeah, regardless of who the coach is. Exactly. Yeah. We're never far from that. Like, so it's always going to be you're never. They don't have the perfection line. Like, they don't have that. And when Couturier is out, to your point, like with Patrick, yeah, he was much better because the team is built for this. As deep as they are, it's impossible to replace that one thing. The guy who puts up 70 points and also takes away the best the opponent has to offer. It's impossible to replace that. There's no one else who can play that role. There's only a couple of them in the league. There's a whole trophy for it.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think if you really look at it, and I want to say it's Hart, but because Elliott's been so good, you can take a little bit away from Hart because you only need one goalie, and we do have a reliable backup. But you really look at it, it's like Sean Couturier, Ivan Provorov, and you can include G in that because he's the captain and he used to be the best player on the team. But if you really look at it, those are the two most instrumental players on this team. you lose Provorov, you're not going for a Stanley Cup. I mean,
no.
Otherwise you got to make a trade. Like if that were to happen this year, you got to make a trade. If for, God forbid something happens to Sean Couturier, you're probably not going the entire season without bringing in somebody, right?
I mean, the team is built around the idea Sean Couturier matches up against the other 1C,
right?
And Ivan Provorov plays like,
everybody
2/3 of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like that. You know what? We can hand a period and a half to Ivan Provorov, and we can figure out the other 30 minutes. That's kind of what this team is built to do.
Didn't he have like 31 minutes almost 31 minutes the other day?
He played, there was a stretch where they had back-to-back overtime games. He played like 27 minutes a game in like 2 out of 3 nights. It was insane. Like he's a monster. And this is the regular season.
I know.
Like in a Stanley Cup final, I keep wanting to call it a conference final, but I keep being told there are no conferences. It's just the Final Four. Like in a Final Four series, Stanley Cup final, he's playing half the game. Regulation, he's playing 28, 30 minutes. Like that's what they're going to have to lean on, especially with this defense.
Yeah, and the fact that PK hasn't been that good. And it makes you think of like, if this team is that, like, let's just say the Flyers, let's say they get on a roll. Let's say they pass Boston. This is all possible in my opinion. And let's say they finish with the best record in the East, whatever, conference,
the division.
Let's say they're second best team on paper, going to the playoffs. Do you feel comfortable mortgaging? I mean, it would take a substantial offer of some sort, but like I was saying before, kind of going all in. Like we know we have expansion, we know we're going to risk it, but let's just get a big name. Let's get a Ryan McDonough type of guy. Let's just give up a couple first-round picks, a really good young, like let's give up Zamula, 2 first-round picks, and Jay O'Brien, and get and go get an elite defenseman.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Especially
this team's good enough.
Oh yeah, you only get so many of these chances. Going back to the 2010 team, like 08, 09, 10, 11, we were like, this window, Mike Richards, this window is going to be open forever. It was not.
They didn't go for another goalie.
Yeah, it closed very quickly. So it was I'm all in. Like there are very few assets at this point that I am attached to in any way that I would be like, oh no, you can't do that. Like it's time to win. They can win right now. The window will be open. Yes. Like this is a young enough team, but Giroux, Voracek, these guys are still major contributors.
For sure.
How much longer that's going to be the case, and if you're going to be able to replace them at some point, this is kind of the best mix you're going to have, at least like in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and actually to that point that you're saying, I think Holmgren's biggest mistake was not going out and getting another goalie. You knew Ray Emery was out. Don't get me wrong, you had Brian Boucher, you had Michael Leighton, but you knew both of them were just backups in the league. And I like both those guys, but Brian Boucher at his best was a backup. Michael Leighton was a third-string goalie majority of the time, right? Elite AHL guy.
Yeah.
That's not what you want to take into the Stanley Cup Finals. Spend the first-round picks. Spend whatever you have to. You had an elite championship caliber team there. And to that, I think about moments like this where, you go into the playoffs, you already have a really deep team, you have everything you need, and you're like, well, if we just had that one player, get us over the hump. I think while everybody wants to rush and make moves, I'd rather see if we're that good first, because I think that's what Fletcher's waiting for. Because if they put it all together and they're like, well, they don't even need anybody. So if I go out and just bring in another guy, then we're definitely the best team in the league. That's why I say that.
Yeah, I would. There's so many moving pieces. Like, it's not my job to worry about expansion, but it is Chuck Fletcher's. Like, it's not my job to worry about banking cap space daily, but Chuck Fletcher is looking at it like, well, I can bring in a third of a player right now, like, because we have $11. But by the trade deadline, you'll have banked more. That's why they haven't been putting guys on LTIR. It's why they're sending guys down to the taxi squad and then bringing them back up on game days. Like, it's all to manipulate the salary cap so that they can make a move down the line. I don't see why you wouldn't. Like what? Yeah, we have all these young pieces. There's not Morgan Frost made the team as a 13th forward. He's a first round pick from 3-4 years ago. Like this is how deep this team is right now. When is the 2022 first round pick going to play for this team? It's not. He's going to get traded, whether as a pick or as a player after you select him. So I don't see why you wouldn't at least make an effort to make this team as good as possible.
Yeah, and I think if there was an expansion, we probably would have seen a more aggressive Chuck Fletcher to begin with. And I think especially with the defense, and I think without risk of losing Myers, obviously you're already at risk of losing Ghost, but you don't want to lose Myers, Sanheim, or Provorov. You add in a fourth defenseman you have to protect. Everything changes. Everything gets more complicated. So I see them being a little more practical when it comes to that. Is there anybody you think that you mentioned Morgan Frost? Obviously, he's out for the year, unfortunately, maybe the playoffs. Yeah. Anybody else you think has a chance to maybe get a call, make an impact? Maybe they're not even with the taxi cab squad at this point. But anybody young that you're kind of keeping an eye on personally?
I'll tell you, I've always liked David Katcha. He scored tonight for the Phantoms, I believe. Yep. Yeah, I just like the way that kid played. Thought he had a lot of intensity, and you always see that with young guys in the lineup. First couple games in, they just really want to prove themselves. But like the way he played, I think they have a lot of these like good depth pieces, like borderline fourth line guys who can come in and just give you honest minutes the way Bunneman has. The way we saw Torensky do at points last year. I think they have a lot of those pieces, and they'll probably all get chances at some point. There's going to be guys missing games. It's going to happen. We've already got a couple guys on the COVID list. There's going to be injuries. It's going to be an even more condensed schedule because they're going to have a freaking week off at least. So I think that they have those good depth pieces down in the minors that, not stars, but guys that can come in and there's not a huge glaring hole in your lineup.
Mm-hmm. It's been a weird year. I'm looking at the Phantom squad and there's so many new names on there. And just with everything in COVID, I just feel like there's been so much random turnover. Even Ustamenko's not there. All of a sudden Sandstrom, and you got Lyon who's sitting as third string. It's I wasn't even sure what team I was staring at, but they do seem to be doing well. Do you think a guy like Zamula, who's probably too young, but would you be interested in him getting a shot over, and I'm talking about a little bit later in the year after he's played some hockey, but getting a shot over maybe somebody like Friedman again, or I think Gus is going to probably stick with the team, but maybe over Haig or some injuries. Would you like to see a guy like Zamula inserted, or do you think it's too early?
If they get to the point where Zamula is an option, it'll be well, why the hell not? But I would, in this situation, a couple of years ago, a guy like Zamula, when this team was just kind of floundering and the general manager had no interest in improving the actual NHL team, it was just about acquiring. It was just about acquiring assets and doing what he did to build what they have now. And he did a good job of that. But then I would have been all for, I don't care if Zamula's not ready. Give him a shot. Now it is so much about, let's win tonight. Let's go on a run, that I would prefer Mark Friedman or maybe even Robert Haig, I would prefer Mark Friedman get the shot. But, if the coach is down on him, as it kind of sounds like he might be, it might not be that far away that Zamula, after he plays some hockey, gets comfortable, is suddenly finding himself a little further up the depth chart.
Yeah, and they definitely like Zamula. They kept him up here for a while, and it was weird to watch how quickly Mark Friedman lost his opportunity. Or I don't know, all opportunity, but I think a lot of it was the discipline. I saw, he took some bad penalties as well. He got beat up a little bit physically, not his fault, but again, you're getting beat up physically, you're getting upset, you're getting put in the box. You're also not the fastest, not the biggest, not the strongest. From a coach's standpoint, where they're just looking about kind of forget it and we'll try later on. And unfortunately for him, I don't think he actually deserves that kind of treatment, but I think maybe that's a little bit of what happened.
And yeah, we have a staff now that hasn't been through a bunch of training camps with these guys.
Right.
Don't know them as well.
That's a good point.
He's been through one training camp with Mark Friedman. That's it.
That's
Like
a really good point.
he's met him a couple of times probably. And so he doesn't have that confidence in him. Like if he takes a bad penalty or two, he's just, in my mind, Mark Friedman is the guy I can't trust to put on the ice because he's going to put us down a man. Like, so I fully understand the like the thought process, but I would like to see him at some point get another chance. With some injuries, or you can only bench so many guys before someone else has to come in. So I wouldn't mind seeing him get another chance, just because I don't know, he hasn't looked awful when he's been in there.
And also the team wasn't playing that well at the time. I wonder if you put him under better conditions. He's already he's not the most experienced guy, so what if he gets exposed a little bit there? All right, I do want to talk about the last topic for the show. And you mentioned him a little bit earlier. And I think this is really appropriate because I think there's actually a sweetness to this story that maybe some people haven't really been considering. It's going to be theater for us because we know him. Ron Hextall gets hired to be GM, and Brian Burke actually gets hired by the Pittsburgh Penguins as well, but to be GM of the Penguins. And the Ron Hextall Pittsburgh Penguins era begins. What do you think, Bill? I'll leave my thoughts for after yours.
Man, it's just I'm like, part of me is just interested because I want to see if, like he said in his press conference, I'm not a one-trick pony. I want to see if he can actually do that next thing. We saw him acquire value and draft, get great assets, win a bunch of trades. I want to see if in a different situation he's capable of doing something else. I don't see why he wouldn't be. He just wasn't in that position here. I just want to know if he can. And with Brian Burke, it'll be like Brian Burke is a guy who goes out and makes those moves. They're not always good, but he's trying to win today. Yeah. That's all Brian Burke is worried about. So I'm interested in that dynamic. Like we said on the show today, if I were to tell you a month and a half from now, Ron Hextall and Brian Burke got arrested for assaulting each other, this would be completely believable. Like they are going to end up in a fist fight at some point. So like that part is funny. The part of me that's just like, I don't even care about GM Ron Hextall. I care about goalie Ron Hextall, our guy, Sexy Hexy. He's running that team. Like, you couldn't be running the Minnesota Wild. Like, if you were running the Dallas Stars, I wouldn't care at all. It's just like, you got to be running the Penguins. You're the guy in charge of squeezing the end of the juice out of the Crosby and Malkin era. Like, why? Why does that have to be the team? Like, that's disappointing, but what's the guy supposed to do? Not work, I guess. So I get it.
I think he grew up a Penguins fan, if I remember correctly.
A Penguin?
I think I heard something
Penguins
about that.
fan.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's got to be a lie. It was only because of Mary Lemieux. But yeah, okay. I agree with everything you said there for the most part, right? But let's think about it for a second here. We know who Ron Hextall is. He's definitely, I would agree. I don't think he's a one-trick pony. I actually think he's brilliant. I think his downside is the same downside that he has in hockey, is that he's an asshole, and on the ice, he's an asshole. And I think he's a very nice guy. I think in the workplace, I think he also might be, let's just say, a little more standoffish. And I think that's I've worked for Comcast. You can't beat them. You can try to be standoffish with them. You can't. You can make your little bubble. It's not happening. I think that was his downside. I do think he's a brilliant hockey guy, but let's be honest. He's going to have a plan. They didn't hire him for no reason. And I already heard Brian Burke say that this team is nowhere close to winning a championship. So that's the Pittsburgh Penguins with Sidney Crosby. So you go in, you realize Brian Burke said that. Ron Hextall is the type of guy who's going to reset. We should grab some popcorn because I am very interested to see the tears that will come from Penguins fans as they watch Letang get traded for being undisciplined, and probably the other slew of players that they have that he probably doesn't like because they're undisciplined, and maybe even Malkin included. And most likely he's going to do to them what he did to us, where he's going to ride Malkin and Crosby to be an average team, right? Just at that bubble, and collect assets over a few years and maybe try to make a big trade here or there from his lessons learned. But realistically, they might have several years of mediocrity and pain.
That would be awesome.
Do you see any of that?
I see an interesting dynamic between Burke and Hextall, where if Burke says they're not here, they're not close to winning a championship, I get what he's saying. That could also just be like
posturing,
one of those motivational tactics. Right. Like, oh yeah, well, guess what? Everyone's job is on the line now. Like, it could be that. And like, he is there to kind of provide that, while Hextall can kind of be that, can kind of middle it like he did here. And he's not riding G and Jake. He's riding Crosby and Malkin. Yes. You know, they're really good still. They're not the best two players in the world anymore, but like, to fall off from that down to another, like, they're still pretty damn good. So if he's able to help them kind of do a Flyers sort of rebuild on the fly and acquire those assets and just worry about that part of the hockey, and Brian Burke, one, appeases the CEO and reports, and while Hextall's over in his bubble, and maybe provides some motivation, maybe assists in making some bigger moves. I could see how they could sort of middle it and pull off both, but I don't see how they can become championship material. Like, I just don't see if Hextall and Burke can pull that off. Wow, what a job they've done. Like, I don't see the assets they have now being able to turn them into a championship caliber team.
They don't. They're completely empty. That's why when I look at that lineup, I'm like, it screams of when Hextall took over the Flyers. Like, it just screams of it, of a team that's slowly clinging to a bubble playoff performance, right? Riding off their two elite players. You know, they've emptied all of their assets. Their best prospects are either in the NHL or non-existent. And though I will argue, the Penguins are sneaky smart with drafting and all this stuff. So they probably have better prospects than we anticipate. But having said that, do you really think that Hextall is not going to be like Mr. Patient? Like, that he took this job saying, oh yeah, I'll turn this around in a year or two? Like, there's almost no way. He has to at least be the same guy to be like, listen, I can maybe speed it up a little bit. I have some lessons learned, but I said 6 years of pain when I took the job in Philadelphia. You know, I'm not coming in here going, I'm going to turn it around.
Yeah. And like, to think with what they currently have, that it would take a year or two. Like, oh yeah, so in a year or two from now, guess where Malkin's going to be? The KHL. Like, a year or two from now, Crosby's going to be a year or two older. Like, I don't see the ability for them. Yeah.
That would be the move, though. Now, if you want to be ballsy and you're Ron Hextall, I'm not saying they should do this, but if you do move Evgeny Malkin today, you're going to get a hefty return for him. Like, you're not getting peanuts for Evgeny Malkin. You're going to get the first-round picks you want. You might get an elite young prospect, something to build around in the future. I don't think that that's what's going to happen. But if they really wanted to like reset, that would be the way to do it. Move Malkin, move Letang, maybe just keep Crosby, move everybody else and just rebuild your culture around Crosby. He can definitely handle it. But at the same time, like, you're going to have Crosby, Gensel, and then, Kapanen.
And Goons, yeah.
Exactly. Like, they have, again, they're always going to be a competitive team. I doubt they're going to be, like, really bad, but they clearly don't have the assets to get anything elite. They have nothing brewing from within. So, I don't know. I feel like it was a sad day for me. Like, I didn't like it. I like Ron Hextall still. I didn't like it. But when I thought about it, I was like, but it does mean the Pittsburgh Penguins kind of announced that, hey, we're throwing up the flag. We recognize we're not that good.
That's regardless of what situation they think, like, or we from the outside think they're in. Like, Ron Hextall's been the GM of one team, and that was his strategy. It's what he's known for, So, like, you have to at least believe that's part of it, that they're going to be not going for it, thinking, we're cup champs. So that's nice.
Yeah, watch like our luck. He ends up like bringing in young players, and they're so much better. And then it's just gonna be Crosby has like a career year, puts up 130 points or something, playing with some rookie we never heard of. And then he trades for Shane Gostisbehere, and he does better than Letang. All these kind of things that nobody wants to see.
That would be incredible. Honestly, it would be. Awful, incredible, and awful,
all at the same time. All right, so we're at the hour here. Obviously, we're not going to have hockey for a little bit. I believe the next game is going to be on next Thursday at this point. So if you're listening, this is on Wednesday, so we have another week with all the postponed games, but we'll probably get a big crunch. I assume there's going to be some reshuffling of the schedule to some degree. So we'll get
play some double headers or something.
I think a lot of back-to-back games. We're going to get that. Yeah, it's going to be a little brutal for the players, but whatever. At least we get hockey. So that'll be cool. Bill, what's going on with you? What are you working on? Obviously, I think people know Broad Street Hockey already, kind of where to follow you. Bill Matz on, I think you're Bill? At Philadelphia 1, right, on Twitter. But what are you working on? Anything coming out? Anything you want to let people know about?
Yeah, it's the we published a new episode today, Broad Street Hockey. You know where to find our podcast. I do the post games on Twitch now. It's twitch.tv/BSH_radio. I'm pretty sure that's it. And after every game, live, talking for like 30, 45 minutes just about the game. And Monday through Friday, 4 to 8 on the radio.com app. I produce a show called You Better You Bet. It is an all sports gambling show every day. So anyone out there with that gambling itch, give it a listen. It's a really fun show. 2 great hosts. I produce it. I get a segment where I make hockey picks. I'm around 500, but it's a cool show. It's a good time.
Nice. That's awesome. And definitely make sure to check out the whole crew of Steph, Kelly, Charlie, and Bill on their podcast as well.
Charlie's doing fine. We don't need to.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He's too popular at this point. But again, thanks again for coming on. Thank you again to our sponsor, Jim Steaks on South. They're Flyers fans. Make sure to check out Jim Steaks. They're awesome. And obviously COVID era. So order food. Keep these businesses alive. And to everybody else, please like, subscribe, comment. I read all the comments. So if you have any comments, concerns, or anything, just reach out. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it throughout this whole time. Be doing more stuff, more videos coming out, doing more of the Always Level Up podcast. I believe I have Riley Cote for the next episode. I haven't necessarily booked him I'm trying to get a date with him, but
Cote's great.
Yeah. I'm excited to get him on, have a conversation with him, a little bit off topic too, not all hockey, which would be cool. I'm doing that soon. So thank you again. And thanks, Bill. This was fun. This was a good conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. And remember to always stay gritty.